Awesome, y'all. Why don't we jump in and get started? Cool. Everybody, welcome to the folks who are here and the folks who are going to be joining and listening in the future. My name is Reuben Ogbonna. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Marcy Lab School, a nonprofit organization based here in Brooklyn, New York, building an aspirational alternative to college, partnering with incredible tech companies who are thinking differently about diverse tech talent, providing a one-year pathway into software engineering and other technical careers. I'm joined here with two incredible talent acquisition leaders. We have Erykah-Nicole Scruggs, an associate manager of talent acquisition at Kargo, an incredible partner of the Marcy Lab School, and Shanna Naeole, a senior campus recruiter at FanDuel, and home to an incredible Marcy Lab School graduate, Jared Moore, who's a software engineer there. We're excited to bring to you all a conversation about the importance of skills-based hiring and how an effort to use skills as opposed to credentials as a pathway into technical careers and non-technical careers can be a strategy to diversifying any workforce. And so with that, I'd love to pass the floor over to our incredible guest today. I'd like to set the stage by having you all talk a little bit about your organizations, the role that you're in right now, and something that you didn't expect, or maybe a misconception about your company as a way to kick off our conversation today. I guess I'll first pass it off to you, Erykah-Nicole.
Oh, thanks so much. Hey, y'all. So excited to join you today. Like Reuben said, I'm Erykah. I'm Kargo's Associate Manager of Talent. I live and work in New York. Kargo is a mobile ad tech company. So we build a lot of the formats for advertisements that go on websites like E! News, Food Network, US Weekly. We truly sit in between brands and publishers and allow them space and creative and activation on both ends. I think one of the things that was like a misconception of the space was honestly how homogenous it was. I'm originally from Cincinnati and I moved to New York to work here at Kargo. And I walked in, curly hair, day one, and I was like, oh my gosh, where are all the people that look like me? That was in 2021. And since then, I truly have become, honestly, a student of diverse recruitment and recruiting intentionally. And that is also where Kargo is today.
Awesome. Thank you, Erykah. What about you, Shanna?
Yeah, I am Shanna Naeole. I work for FanDuel, and FanDuel is a large sports betting and gaming company. I think the biggest stereotype that, maybe not a stereotype or something I didn't expect, was how much representation and diversity there actually is within our organization. Just when you hear the term sports betting, I think a lot of people assume male, and that is true. The vast majority of users tend to be young, male, and affluent. And so to some degree, I anticipated that walking in to our doors, that it was going to be very male heavy. In Atlanta specifically, though, I was very surprised at the representation, both from a female and ethnic perspective, that I saw. And I think I've been very happy to see that, because it is even more support for the efforts that we're making in the talent space. And a lot of people who are kind of rallying behind these more grassroots efforts to make that progressive step forward, both on the early career front and with our experienced hires.
Awesome. Thank you, Shanna. I'd love to take this conversation in the direction of personalizing companies, personalizing outreach towards talent, because we know that talent isn't a monolith. We've had the experience, the privilege of being able to partner with you all, thinking about pathways into companies that typically require a four-year college degree. And that being said, you all have very diverse technical workforces and non-technical workforces. I'd love to hear you all talk about how you think about creating an environment where the uniqueness of every employee can be served, but at the same time being able to scale up onboarding and development in a way that's actually workable and scalable for your company. So how do you balance kind of both of those things? Maybe Erykah, you can start.
Yeah, of course. I think for us, one of the things that we like to do is an internship experience every summer. A lot of times we'll kind of transition those individuals into full-time partners, or we'll extend the internship into the next semester with hopes that eventually they'll come on to Kargo. It also is a really great opportunity just for folks to take a try at the ad tech space, the tech space. Sometimes folks moving into New York for that summer or into another different city. We also have rolled out fellowship programs for students like our fabulous Marcy Lab students to give them a little bit like more rigorous and in-depth experience at, say, a software engineering role or a developer role or anything of the like. When it comes to fostering that community and making sure that folks feel served where they are, we do so much stuff. Of course, it's Black History Month this month, so we've been up to lots of different things. Last week, we had a chef come in and tell stories through Black Eyed Peas. So we got the hot plates out and we're cooking up Black Eyed Pea fritters, which my mom we've always done Black Eyed Peas on New Year's, but I've never had in a fritter form. So I was like, oh shoot, this is fantastic. So really celebrating folks with all the things that they come to Kargo with. We've done movie nights and we do like Lunar New Year celebrations, all of that type of thing at the cultural level is super important for us as well.
That's awesome. I just came back from Nigeria this past Christmas break, where my family's from, and kind of bean fritters are very common, like kind of street food snack in Nigeria and in Ghana.
Yeah, it completely changed my life. I was like, oh, and we had leftover batter. I'm like, I'm taking this home.
Taking it home. Absolutely.
Yes.
Awesome. Shanna, how do you all think about community in particular, kind of serving the diverse kind of cross section of people that you all employ?
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially at the early career phase or career pivoters, to help them find connections, meaningful connections. And in some ways, I see that as my role as somebody who helps to lead the intern program to make sure that we're getting them to individuals outside of their team who may be advantageous resources. I've been pleasantly surprised at how many non-traditional backgrounds we have within our workforce. So a lot of career pivoters, maybe folks who did an undergrad degree in one area and now are pivoting into tech. And being able to help find those connections is really important to help, one, our employees see that, hey, there are others like me who are kind of coming through a similar journey, and that creates a relatable experience, but also potential people who can either mentor or advocate for them in the future. Similarly, I think our employee resource groups do a great job of that. I think especially organizations that have invested in ENGs or ERGs, however you want to think of them, that does also create a safe space for those who identify or support those particular groups. And we try to immerse our interns in that even while they're here over their 10-week journey. It may seem like they're really busy and invested in their day-to-day work of just learning what their team does and how they contribute. But I think that exposure culturally to our organization too will help them understand their potential fit with us. And that's really, to me, it's a shared journey. It's something where, yes, we want them to contribute and potentially become full-time members of our organization, but I also see that as an opportunity for them to be a part of that decision-making process. I'm sure we've all worked for organizations before where we've said, this feels like home. And there have been other places where we figured out very quickly that maybe that isn't the right place for us. So I think it's really important to help provide these resources, whether it's people or systems or tools, to help our talent be successful and, make the determination for themselves about how they may become a full-time member of our workforce. And I think Erykah can probably agree with this too, but I see my role as somebody who can help challenge the norms around how we make decisions. So personally, one of the things that I like to ask my hiring teams is, what's something new or different that this individual can bring to the table? It kind of helps break down the barriers of their fit right? Like we often try to find people who are going to assimilate, but instead recognizes how those differences or those new contributions might be a positive thing. And I think that helps us think about talent in a different way, instead of just blending in and fitting in, but really what's something they're going to bring to the table in a really positive way.
Yeah, that's really good, Shanna. I would agree there. I know for myself, whenever I'm kicking off a role with the hiring manager, generally we get into like, okay, what types of things differently are we looking to do this time around? A lot of times we do want to focus on diversity, especially in the space that we're in. We have like strategists and marketers. We want to make sure that it's not a group of like just one type of person that's making up these advertisements or are going back to these companies being like, well, here's what we have. But it's like, well, who do you guys have in the room making those decisions? And that's super important for us and definitely a driver behind our early career strategy and our internships as well.
It's awesome. I think, we're fortunate to have you two as partners at companies that have long since championed diversity as a core part of their hiring strategy. And the Marcy Lab School represents a type of post-secondary organization that is kind of growing across the country, that's advocating for non-traditional or skills-based hiring as a pathway to more diverse hiring. And we've been fortunate to be able to call you all partners, for you to be able to interview our students on the basis of their skills and not necessarily on the basis of a four-year degree. But with that being said, that's in many cases for many companies a bit of a radical stance. But you two individually and your companies have sought benefit in the strategy of skills-based hiring. I would love for you two to talk a bit about why personally in your role as an individual talent leader and from the company's perspective, what benefits you all are seeing in the possibility of opening up pathways to non-traditionally trained talent or through skills-based hiring pathways.
Yeah, maybe I'll take just a quick stab at it, but I think one of the really unique things I've learned over the course of my career working for a lot of different companies is that good talent comes from everywhere. And that isn't necessarily reflective of a certain list of schools. But I think we can all attest we probably worked with somebody at some point who maybe didn't have a degree and just like the rock stars. Or maybe they had a non-traditional way into their career. Maybe they pivoted after 30 years of doing something different. And I think those always become great use cases to help justify why we need to be more progressive in the talent space and to advocate for people, not necessarily a resume or what's listed out on a piece of paper, but what the individual is capable of. And sometimes that's really hard to get through these non-traditional old school processes. But I think that's why it's really important to think differently about what it takes to be successful. The market is changing so rapidly. And if we don't keep up with that, you're going to miss out on some of the best talent possible. And that means we need to reframe our way of thinking and the way we operate to attract talent and break down some of these barriers to entry that are really preventing the best and most diverse talent possible from getting to us.
Yeah, that's really good, Shanna. There were 2 points there. I'm like, yes, definitely want to go back on that. Even for me, myself, I am a talent pivoter. One of the things that I love about being in HR and talent is that so many of us like didn't go to school for HR. I myself, I majored in fashion merchandising. I spent most of my time like trying to crank out croquis that like were half good. But I also did HR as a minor, and I was like, I want to do this, like I want to do HR. And then I got into HR, I was like, I kind of want to do talent. And then I ended up there that way. So breaking down some of those barriers of entry is something that's super important to me because I'm like, hey, like ENS would not be here if those barriers of entry existed or some of those existed. And then I think too, at Kargo, we are of the same brain. Like we literally cannot afford to not meet the talent and the candidates where they are. There's so many more like macrocosm, like things are going on. College is expensive. They have to choose between going to college or taking care of a family or supporting themselves. Um, People can literally pick up talent on YouTube University right now. And so it's really changing the way that talent comes to us as well.
Yeah, YouTube University is real.
Yeah.
When I think about the seats that you will occupy as like champions and sponsors of folks who often don't have the platform to elevating into companies like yours, I must imagine that you all will have encountered challenges along the way, whether they be kind of logistical challenges of hiring a non-traditional profile, or challenges with advocacy internally, or you may have just been witness to challenges at this type of work elsewhere at other companies. What have you noticed to be the things that require a little extra work for the talent acquisition folks who may be watching this in the future or right now? What would you advise them in terms of kind of their first steps if they want to begin navigating a skills-based hiring process or hiring non-traditional talent?
I think that piece around barrier to entry is really important, and it comes from like awareness, right? So what is truly preventing us from being able to get the best talent possible, and as part of that, the best diverse talent possible as well. I think once you have an understanding of that, then you can work on where are people falling out in our process? What are we doing that's preventing them from being the most successful? And then challenging that, right? Are there things we need to remove, or are there ways we need to rethink things? One of the biggest hurdles, I think, sometimes is just the argument that we have plenty enough interest in our organization, right? Maybe I don't need to look at all the applicants. I'm going to look at what shuffles to the top and looks the best. Well, sometimes that's not always the best long-term play, right? It might be us thinking about what we think we need right now to jump in and do the job, and not thinking about strategic long-term growth within finding leaders within our organizations, or also thinking about the future state of the skill sets that we need. So I think it's sometimes a short-sighted view to think about how we get to the best candidate for here and now, and that's not always a long-term view.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. At Kargo, if we're noticing some barriers of entry or areas of opportunity of getting candidates like through a process, a lot of times we'll go back and review like, okay, who did we speak to? What happened? Is that something that we need? Can we change it up? Do they need more time? Is it attainable? Is it accessible? If it's like an assessment or something like that, like what do we need to do in order to kind of remove some of those barriers of entry, especially if we're looking at things like assessments and the candidate has already done well for a few interviews, like let's try to see what else we can do. We also have a very dynamic interview process. We're not afraid to say, okay, what happened? And ask questions and ask for feedback from both ends.
All of those things make a ton of sense. And one of the things that I think about is like the case studies of success will be what helps people navigate the challenges that you all laid out in pursuit of like this ultimate end goal. Even if the sample size is really small, do you all have stories of like success that you can point to from like a non-traditional hiring process, or from a candidate that was hired through a skills-based hiring process, as opposed to through the traditional college degree route? And or if you have a hypothesis as to what you believe you will see as this strategy expands, like what are the ways that you can see candidates who come through this profile adding value at your companies in unique ways?
Erykah, I've answered first before. Do you want to take a stab first?
We're doing some musical chairs again with the spaces, so excuse me. In terms of like skills based and those success stories, I would say we are like a lot of times for me, if I'm looking through resumes, I'll go like, okay, what are some of those keywords that I can bring in? If it's if it's JavaScript, if it's R, if it's Python, like what can we bring in there? And I'm looking at those instead of, and not necessarily what that person is majored in or what the education looks like. If they have the skills, let's talk to them. That's how I have recruited and found a lot of success in those non-traditional students. I want to see that they have what they need in order to do well at the job. And if they can't pass the interview, then that's a different story. But we're not necessarily looking at like, okay, did they go to XYZ university and get this certification or like all of those things, which are they're all very valuable. And we want to see those skills on there. So I oftentimes coach a lot of my candidates like, hey, I noticed that you can talk to me about Excel for 5 hours and I didn't see it on there. Like throw that on there so that your recruiters can find you when they need you.
Thank you for that, Erykah.
Of course.
I feel pretty fortunate at FanDuel that when I first joined, one of my things is always just to understand the reality of the organization. And so just through networking, found a lot of great examples of experienced hire employees who, again, were pivoters or maybe just completed a boot camp and were joining our workforce. I even had a friend who literally was just doing that. She was transitioning from teaching, did a boot camp, and now she actually works at FanDuel as like just kind of an entry-level software engineer. And so when that happens, those kind of use cases, best case scenarios had already laid some of the groundwork for me. But when that doesn't exist, the barriers are a lot harder because you do spend more time trying to help some of your managers and leaders understand the value of changing your standards and expectations. Non-traditional candidates are not any less valuable because they don't have a 4-year degree. They just have gotten their curriculum in a different way. And even today, I had another example where one of the engineers I'm taking to an event with me, she did an undergrad degree in economics, and now she's a site reliability engineer. And all of that was completely self-taught. She didn't even go through a boot camp. To me, honestly, I think that's even more impressive because for those of us who maybe do have a 2 or 4 year degree, somebody to some degree held our hand to the fire to get that completed. So self-taught, on your own accord is very difficult even through these programs. So I think that attests a lot to work ethic. I think it attests to your ability to pivot and be versatile in a new kind of forum for learning. And that's what we really need to help our leaders understand is this doesn't make them any less valuable. It just means they acquire their knowledge in a very different way. And instead, we focus more on the skill set. And all of our engineers go through kind of what's called a tech chops. And that is the base level. So we understand where they are. It's not meant to necessarily weed people out, but truly help our teams understand where they're at in their understanding of certain things. And that way, the teams have a good understanding when they come in of what those gaps are that they need to help fill. And I think that's helped to make the process much more objective, right? And a supportive environment to help us train whoever it is that comes through the door, whether it's a degreed or non-degreed candidate, help get them to where we need them to be in the long run.
Both of those perspectives were super helpful. One of the things I'm thinking about are like all the different moments from kind of like prospect to onboarding and beyond where the pipeline for non-traditional talent is kind of leaky. And I would love to ask you all a series of questions based on what you've seen. And I want to start with like the kind of application resume screen, like the very early stages of the talent acquisition process. If nothing else, I think most people would yield that like, okay, maybe the classes that I took in college, they're not as relevant, especially depending on what I majored in or how long ago it was. But they'll say, well, that name on the resume will help like elevate my resume up the stack. That college degree is the first line of my undergraduate resume. A question I'd have for you all is when you're thinking about how someone who's not coming from a traditional college background, those resumes or those kind of applicant experiences that have allowed them to stand out, like what are those things that come to mind if you're providing advice to prospective job applicant or to a training program about how non-traditional talent can really stand out in the early stages of the process, what would you do, or what would you say?
I'm happy to take it on first. For myself, I always tell the candidates to start with the job description first. A lot of times there will be like a software engineer at one company and then a software engineer at another company, and those two roles would be almost completely different. Like obviously the baseline is the same, but maybe they're looking for this person to collaborate in a like cross-functional team a little bit different than the other one. So making sure that you just look at the JD. As simple as it sounds, you have to be really intentional about it. So Reuben, you were talking about like some of the classes, like maybe that doesn't apply or maybe it doesn't. Look at the JD. If there are words in the JD that are the job description, if there are words in the job description that match like maybe some of the classes that you're taking. For example, for a talent recruiter, like maybe we're looking at negotiation 101. If I was doing negotiation for a job description, I would want to make sure that I have that on my resume so that if I'm going through as a recruiter, I can find you really quickly. That is like the number one thing, making sure that the descriptions for each of your roles match up with what's on the job description, like what they're looking for. Maybe you're saying the same thing, but just give the recruiter a little extra help, give them that leeway there, so that they can find what they're looking for.
Super helpful, Erykah. Thank you. And
Yeah.
Shanna, what about you? If a candidate from a non-college background was to really stand out in the early part of a application interview process, what would be true about their profile, their application, their resume?
Yeah, I think just helping us understand kind of curriculum. It's still curriculum at the end of the day. Like, what are you learning? And what do you hope to achieve in terms of like proficiency around certain skills, frameworks, knowledge, et cetera. I think sometimes students overlook even their own work experience that may be unrelated to the field. For example, if you have a side job working at Starbucks as a barista, like that's customer service skills. Having done that job before, I know it's very difficult. So like, don't discredit some of those experiences. If anything, as a recruiter, I look at that and think, wow, they're managing to do all this study and work a full-time job at the same time, or even part-time job. That tells me a little something about their time management skills. That shows me that this is somebody who's earnest, hardworking, and in pursuit of their goals. So I think don't discredit some of that additional work experience, even if it's unrelated to the field you're trying to get into. And then think about leadership skills. Again, sometimes people are like, well, I'm not the team captain of my sports team, or, I haven't been in a leadership position per se. Well, maybe you have school projects or curriculum projects that you're taking the lead on, or maybe you're doing self-interest. There's some things you're doing on your own that you're wanting to learn, and you're taking the lead or initiative with that. Don't undermine those opportunities or don't overthink them. Put it on there, help show where you've stepped up to the plate, taken on leadership opportunities or initiative, and some of that like self-skilled or self-taught learnings as well. I think students overlook. So even if you're going through a curriculum, maybe there's things on your own you're practicing or learning, especially with all the tools available on LinkedIn. Like, those are great ways to show us that you're really invested into what you're trying to get to, from a career perspective.
Yeah. That's really good, Shauna. I would add there too, make sure that you can speak to that story too. Like, okay, I took this one course and I knew I needed to like figure out, like I knew I needed to kind of get in on another side of that learning. So I took this other course, like making sure that you can tell me the full story and what the intent was behind your journey there.
Super helpful. I have a question about the next stage in the process, and then maybe finally one more about retention. Um, One of the questions that tends to come up in these circles is like, what does it look like to support, diverse talent, non-traditional talent, and any number of markers that would indicate someone will be vulnerable for any of the rigors or the challenges that come up in the corporate workplace. And then when we get into these conversations, many of the ideas, the structures, the systems that people surface, they would be great support structures for like all talent. And so I'm kind of coming in with that perspective. But with that being said, I am acknowledging that for someone who isn't coming through a college pathway, oftentimes the stakes are a little bit higher, both internally, because this may be the first person from this background, and for the candidate themselves, knowing that like each opportunity is that much harder to come by. And so because of that, I think it's that much more important that the right support structures are in place that we would want for all candidates, but especially for those who have a few additional challenges that they're navigating. So with that being said, when you think about onboarding these candidates who are coming from these kind of core pipelines from non-traditional backgrounds, what are some of the best practices that you've seen or that you hope to see at your companies or in this space to ensure that they can successfully navigate onto the job?
I might have an unpopular response,
Please.
but I think in some ways I don't want to treat them any differently by assumption, meaning I want them to have the same experience integrating into the organization. I want them to learn the same things about the company, our leadership, their role, etc. But what I do think is important is recognizing that their experience leading into might have been a little bit different, right? And so that might prompt more of a conversation or a dialogue around, I think, the community and the connections we initiate for that individual. So we might think differently about during an internship experience, are there some of those non-traditional employees with non-traditional backgrounds that we can pair them with that might be able to lean in a little bit more to the experience that they have? Is there a community of support we can connect them with? Or maybe that's having the conversation to say, hey, if you identify any needs specific to you and what we can help with, tell us so we can help initiate some of that. But I would also say that to any candidate, right? Any intern, I would say, advocate for yourself, help us understand when there's gaps in what we're providing, or the experience that you're going through. We need to know that. So creating that open forum for discussion to really help meet that individual where they are in terms of the support that we give them.
Well
Shanna,
said, Shanna. Thank you.
Oh, I was just gonna say I like what you said, and I know you said I was an unpopular opinion, but I actually really love that approach. At Kargo, one of the things that I'm super proud of is how personalized and how touched we are with our candidates. So we spend a lot of time with them interfacing. How did that interview go? You know, like just checking in, all of that stuff. So we kind of get a feel for what they have going on. And we know at least something about them, them being the candidates, and then later on, hopefully our partners as they join us. So being able to meet them where they are and say, hey, I know that you are from Texas and you just moved here. Here's this other person that's from Texas and just moved here. Finding those similarities is one of my favorite parts. Is they're like, oh my gosh, like, and then you hear this discord, and then you're like minding your business, and then you hear this like cackle of laughter in the back. Like that's the thing. That's community, and that's how you really integrate someone into your organization.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I have one final question, and if any folks here want to post questions in the Q&A, we'll go to audience questions next. But this is related to yours, Abby. Hey, Abby, it's good to see you. When I think about the common criticisms to this movement in post-secondary education hiring, a common response may be, yes, we're seeing it's possible for folks to come from non-traditional backgrounds and land their first jobs. But what's going to happen much later? Will we see them advance in their careers? Will they hit a glass ceiling? And I would just love for you to talk a bit about how you think about retention and development, career development for folks. And if you see a world where there is kind of a limit to how far one could go in your companies at the very least, or maybe in the industry at large, and if so, what might we do to change that?
I will say that that the point about is there a ceiling or a threshold for these candidates is a really bad stereotype to have, because if you think about talent in general, there's no guarantee. At the end of the day, sometimes I'll have interviewers who will fixate on, well, are they a long-term fit? Well, the reality is nobody can predict the future. And if you relate to your own experience, right, our needs change all the time. Where we might be in 2 months versus 2 years, it's hard to predict that. So I don't think it's necessarily about a ceiling or a threshold. I think there's, vulnerability with anybody you hire that they can choose at any point in time to turn their back on a company. That is just the way the market and the world works today. But I think if an organization can focus on the right things, which is its individual people that make up its workforce, what motivates and incentivizes them, and what are their individual needs to be successful, that really comes from having good leaders in place. But focusing on that, I think, is what's going to help to continue to grow the organization, grow its individual people, and give them the best chance at being successful. I think it's less about your background and experience and where you came from, but more about the individual's aspirations and the motivators that influence them to choose to show up each day for that employer.
Well said, Shanna. Thank you for that.
I'm happy to take a stab at the question as well. So at Kargo, one of the things, or a few of the things that we do, we are committed to annual reviews, and talking about like, hey, what happened and what are we looking to happen next? I so totally agree. It is also a coaching, a mentor, and a leadership thing to kind of think about and consider. If your folks are not growing, what is happening? We have to make sure that those are in place for everyone, not just one group or the other. And then the other thing that we're committed to is lifelong learning. And that's something that hopefully lots of other companies are too. We commit a certain amount of dollars per year for our partners to continue learning, whether it's like, hey, I'm in this team right now, but you know what? I kind of want to take a class on event management, or I kind of want to take a class on like data science. Like, okay, let's do it. And also maybe you want to go to a conference just to be in the room with a certain group of individuals. That is also really important to us too, to make sure that you're diversifying your experience as well.
Thank you, Erykah. I have an audience question here. What advice would you give to women trying to enter into this male-dominated space, especially if they may be coming from a non-traditional background as well?
This is such a good topic, and one that has been really top of mind for me as we meet with a lot of student organizations that are catered towards the female audience. I think, one, be your authentic self. At the end of the day, you want to find your perfect match. And I always equate recruiting to the world of dating. Like, it's a little bit of matchmaking, going through some rough dates before you find the right place that you want to land. But be your authentic self and truly seek out working for an employer or working in an environment that's going to give you the best chance of success and bring you fulfillment in what you're doing. If things don't work out the way you expected, it's okay to accept that may not be the fit now, but that doesn't mean that long-term that won't be a good fit for you. So I think just being yourself, acting with a lot of confidence, because sometimes I think we can get in our head about why we're not good enough. There is truly a statistic that says women are less inclined to apply to something because they don't feel confident they meet all the qualifications, and the male audience is just like, hey, why not, right? So I think going in with a lot of confidence in yourself, trusting your skills and abilities, and don't let any opportunity of rejection hold you back from at least trying.
So, Maya, I think you're in the webinar. You might, I think you're signed into my Zoom. That's okay, everybody. This is our co-founder, Maya.
Oh gosh, should I leave?
I mean, you're here. Why not?
Sorry, good to see everyone.
None of this happens without Maya, so it's really important that you join. Right on time, too.
I'm so embarrassed and so good to
No, it's
be with you
perfect.
all.
My final question. Well, I have one pre-submitted listener question for you, Erykah. You mentioned some of the initiatives around continual learning and development, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity for you to share some of the initiatives that you all have done to increase retention at your company. If there's anything more that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I would kind of go back to some of the things that we've mentioned in the past, which is like those reviews, the coaching, the lifelong learning, creating opportunities for folks to grow. I also really love to see like what we call flout organizations, where I know at Kargo, this was one of my first times, like the CEO is like right behind me at my desk. So it's like, oh wow, like this is attainable. Like I can see this person. It's not like someone that's behind like smoke and mirrors. And that just goes along with culture. And so I would just encourage folks as they are looking for that right fit. Shanna, I always tell my friends, I'm like, this is like dating. So I love that you said that. But when you are looking at companies and interviewing, like those are some things to look out for. Do they have all of those things? And also, what does the interview panel look like? Did you meet with a bunch of people that all looked the same? Was there some diversity there? Ask about the women, like the female identifying leadership. Is there any there? Those are all really great things to kind of keep in mind as you go along your journey and figure out what next looks like.
Awesome, y'all. Well, we're right up on time. Really grateful and appreciative to you for your partnership and for your willingness to engage in this conversation. And I hope that this can be the first of many and that we can keep this going. And many of the folks here and the folks who will hear this in the future will be able to learn from you all and follow in your footsteps. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we hope to continue this conversation soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.